All right, we are back here on the podcast talking New York Yankees baseball. A season has not gone the Yankees' way. Join me today to break it all down. Good friend of the podcast. Talked about the Jets a few years ago. Now he's on the Yankee beat for the Daily News. Gary Phillips here. Gary, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on here. For people who have not been as in touch with the Yankee season after kind of checking out in August here, Gary had a fun story in the Daily News, I think, on Tuesday about going out and talking to some of those brave, hardy souls who went out to watch the Yankee game on Monday here. Gary, what inspired that story for you?
We were all kind of sitting in the press box, all of us writers, dealing with the cold and the rain and the miserable conditions and, realizing, we all are getting paid to be here and have to be here. We don't have a choice. But why would anybody out in the stands want to come to these games or to that game in particular? So I decided to get up out of my seat, walk around, which kept me a little warmer also, and just ask some people why they showed up. And I found a couple nice, wholesome answers and stories, and it was a fun way to spend an inning or two on what was a otherwise very dreary day.
Yeah, that's for sure here. It's kind of been a dreary year for the Yankees, 2 years. I mean, coming into the year, everybody said, okay, this team should win the AL East, if not be right in the wild card mix. Instead, we're sitting here on September 27th. They're out of the playoffs entirely. So what, in your opinion, is the biggest reason that the Yankees did not succeed this year?
I think it's a combination of things. The injuries, obviously, as Aaron Boone said the other day, should not be discounted. Now, the Yankees had some serious losses with Aaron Judge, Anthony Rizzo, multiple members of their rotation, Giancarlo Stanton, the list goes on and on. With that said, they also went into the season with a roster that had serious holes at third base and in left field, among other positions. The depth was not there, as demonstrated by the amount of at-bats guys like Billy McKinney, Jake Bowers, Willie Calhoun, Frankie Cordero have gotten this season. And, there's also clearly a flaw in the process. I think a lot of people like to shout the word analytics like it's some sort of boogeyman, when in reality, all these other contending teams and championship teams are leaning on this. Well, the Yankees need to ask themselves, are we interpreting the data the right way? Do we have the right people in place interpreting this data? So I think it's a combination. It's the injuries, because injuries have been a serious problem for this team for a few years now, but they've always been able to overcome the injuries, at least to the point where they're able to make the postseason.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And I do think it's interesting here following the track of Hal Steinbrenner's thought process. Remember back in June, you said, I don't know why the fans are so disappointed. At that point, they were just tanking at first, but it's still in a wild card spot, but it's probably out of control. And then a few months later, Hal just said, I'm having an external review done on the process that led to this season here. So do you think this is sort of a, I want to say symbolic sort of look, and sort of they're not actually taking anything seriously out of this, because this sort of feels like we're hiring the search firm to do the coaching search for us kind of deal, in terms of actually, I've never seen this sort of thing employed in baseball before. I
wouldn't say it's going to be symbolic. I think Yankees fans should temper their hopes if they think some McKinsey-style organization or company is going to come in and say, fire this guy, fire that guy, stop using analytics and data, because it's not clear which company is doing this, but these types of firms tend to be data-driven. So I don't think the result here is going to end in the use of analytics. I don't think they're going to come in and say, you got to fire so-and-so. I do think there's the potential here for it to change how the Yankees go about their process, how they go about their day-to-day operations, how they go about evaluating, before they make some of these decisions that have been very costly in recent years. So I wouldn't call it symbolic, but I also don't think it's going to result in necessarily the red meat that some fans are craving, to put it that way.
Yeah, so basically on your interpretation, you figure that regardless of what this search firm recommends, you think both Aaron Boone and Brian Cashner are back next year?
If I had to bet on it right now, that is the way I would go. It seems like Boone and Steinbrenner are very close. Cashman obviously has a long history with the organization and the Steinbrenner family. My guess right now is that, any personnel changes will be guys who are more behind the scenes, lower on the totem pole. But we'll see.
Yeah, so in other words, you're saying here, like, maybe, like, we're changing some of the people working in the front office and not, like, any of the real front-facing people like Boone or Cashman.
That's where I'm leaning right now. That's my thinking. Maybe a Michael Fishman type. Maybe the Yankees look at their player health department headed by Eric Cressy and say a change is needed there. Maybe there's some changes on the coaching staff. Maybe it's not even necessarily changes or firings, but a reorganizing of the totem pole, so to speak, where lifelong baseball minds like an Omar Minaya or Brian Sabian, they get more of a say or more authority or more power in the organization. I think this review that we were talking about is going to lead to more of a restructuring than mass layoffs, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure here. And I also think another thing that's interesting here is that Aaron Judge, who obviously named the captain this year, he missed some time with the toe injury here. He's been very vocal about areas he felt the team went wrong this year in terms of like not having enough depth, injury, so on and so forth here. Are you surprised that Judge's been as vocal as he has about like the issues of the team?
I'm not really. He's a guy who is involved and is being listened to as far as the organization, and when it comes to decision making and all that, he was very instrumental and involved in Anthony Volpe's promotion and how the Yankees were going to handle him. Judge had a conversation with members of the organization about, if you're going to call this kid up, make sure he gets a shot, and it's not just 3 weeks and he struggles, you send him down. So Judge seems to be leaning more and more into this leadership role, and I don't mean leadership just in the sense of leading the locker room, but a position of authority within the organization. And his words carry weight in that locker room. So when he speaks, guys are going to listen. The organization is going to listen. That is the position he's put himself in. That's the position that the Yankees have put themselves in with the contract that they gave him and the captaincy that they gave him. So, no, I'm not surprised that, after a season like this, he's wielding his power or voice a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure here. You mentioned some of the rookies here. Obviously, Anthony Volpe showed flashes this year. He showed some promise, had some issues with strikeouts at points this year. Jason Dominguez comes up, looks great for 8 games. Now he's Tommy John, about probably maybe till June next year. They brought a bunch of other kids on the end of the year. Everson Pereira, Oswald Peraza, Austin Wells. Oswald Cabrera was on and off this year. Like, have the Yankees got enough out of the rookies next year to say anybody besides Volpe is locked in as themselves a regular?
I think Wells has been really impressive, especially over the last week or so. He came up with this reputation as a bat-first guy whose defense was going to be problematic. Well, the defense has been pretty good. The pitching staff has only said glowingly positive things about his receiving and his game calling and the work he's doing behind the scenes. So Aaron Boone also has said his arm is a lot better than expected. So that has to be really encouraging, that this top prospect who was allegedly not a good defender is clicking right off the bat and clicking, mid-season without ever catching most of these pitchers. And then the bat has really come along in the last week. Wells talked the other day about, just getting more and more reps, seeing more and more pitchers for the first time that he's never seen before, and how with every day he's getting more and more comfortable. Well, now you're seeing it. You also mentioned Peraza. I'm not quite sure what his future with the Yankees is going to be, but it's pretty clear that he can play at any infield position, between second, short, and third. He looks spectacular wherever they put him. His defense is legit. Boone is constantly raving about it. And his bat's also come along a little bit more. So it's been a small sample this month of September, mid-August for a couple of these rookies. These guys are gonna, if they're still on the team, they're gonna get more time and opportunities to prove themselves in spring training this coming year. But I would expect to see, a couple of these guys in the mix by the time opening day rolls around in 2024.
Yeah, that's for sure. And obviously, this will not be the Yankees here if they settle on rookies here. They do have a lot of issues to fill here. So, like, from your vantage point, what do you feel like the biggest needs the Yankees have to fill this winter are?
They need a left-handed hitting outfielder. They probably need an additional left-handed hitting bat somewhere, wherever they want. They have plenty of choices as to where that person could fit on the field. And it looks like they're going to need some rotation depth, if not a guy at the top of the rotation. Now, Michael King is has been phenomenal. He deserves to be a starting pitcher next year. And that could be an extremely cost-efficient move for the Yankees as well, that maybe allows them to upgrade or fortify other parts of the roster. With that said, I think they still need to add some starting pitching because you see some of the guys that they're leaning on in the injury histories that they have, and to just go into next year with only 5 or 6, definitive starting pitchers is a recipe for disaster. So those are the big names this year. You can make a case that almost every position or area of the roster is in need of an upgrade or at least has concerns other than shortstop and right field. So it'll be interesting to see how the Yankees kind of allocate their resources.
Yeah, the pitching I think is a fascinating question here because obviously you have Cole and Rodon on war-return contracts. Nestor's coming off an injury. Severio and Montas probably gone. I figure Herman probably gets non-tendered too here. I know they have seen stuff that like Clark Schmidt and Michael King here. Do you think this is more of a because I know they've been linked to guys like Yoshinobu Yamamoto in the market here, but if the market gets too high, I think they kind of go on the lower end to sort of fill the back of the rotation here.
I think it's a possibility. I think the good thing about getting Schmidt and King this experience this year and also having them thrive while doing so is that, those are cost-efficient starting pitchers. It's not just that they have talent, it's that they will have a very low salary, even with King going to arbitration. So that's one way the Yankees could maneuver this offseason if, they want to rectify the mistake of last winter and add to their offense. Maybe they double down and say, hey, you know what? These guys are too young or too inexperienced, or we need King in the bullpen, and they add a starting pitcher and a bat. I think there's multiple ways they can go about it, and those two pitchers in particular give them some financial flexibility.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And the last thing here is obviously the Yankee budget is always sort of a mystery now with Hal. I know they spend a lot of money, but this is not like the George Yankees where they're more of a business now as opposed to I want this guy's to be a Yankee regardless of cost here. They have a lot of big contracts in their books already. They spent big last year with Carlos Rodon and Aaron Judge's re-signing, and it makes you wonder here, do they try and go top of the market in your opinion, go get one of the big stars here? You think they try and spread their money around more and try and just fill more holes?
The thing is with this market this offseason, there's not that many great free agents available. You're going to have, like you said, Yamamoto coming over from Japan. Blake Snell is going to be fresh off a Cy Young Award. How much money would you be willing to give him in his injury history? Now, on the offensive side, there's Cody Bellinger, who's had a really nice bounce back year, but again, is a guy who has battled injuries, and also some of the underlying metrics would suggest that even his bounce back this year is not necessarily sustainable. So do you want to throw over $100 million at him? That's something that the Yankees are going to have to think about. They might look to do more mid-tier stopgap type options that kind of fortify what is going to be a younger roster, possibly with some experienced veterans, some guys who are considered clubhouse leaders, things like that. So there's a few different ways they could go about it. They could obviously explore the trade market. If the Padres decide they want to make somebody like Juan Soto available, the Yankees have to be all in on that, even if it's just for a year. But that remains to be seen. So it'll be interesting to see how the Yankees go about the offseason and go about the winter, considering the limited free agent market.
Yeah, obviously there's one very big free agent I have to ask about here, because obviously Shohei Ohtani is on the market. He can't pitch next year, but he should be able to hit. I know that the Yankees have loved him in the past. The reports they tried to talk about trading for him from the Angels a couple of times here. His market's supposed to be very, very expensive historically, probably more kind of worth more money than anybody on the roster's ever gotten here. Do you think they at least pick up the phone and try and get involved here? Or you think this might be more than that they're trying to allocate right now?
Look, I think every team should be in the business of wanting to add Shohei Ohtani. I don't think there's really anything to think about there. Now, whether Shohei Ohtani wants to be a Yankee or wants to be in New York is a different story. The one thing I will say with the Yankees, and I'm not saying this should stop them from pursuing him, but they already have a permanent DH in Giancarlo Stanton, and they're paying him a lot of money, and they're stuck paying him a lot of money for the next few years. So unless by some sort of miracle they're able to dump him, you are now committing essentially 2 roster spots to a permanent DH. Roster flexibility has already been an issue for the Yankees this year and in recent years. Now you're jamming it up a little bit more. With that said, I think for a guy with of Ohtani's caliber and the production that he puts out, that's worth, maybe jamming up your roster a little bit more. But I'll just add the caveat that it's not the perfect fit right now.
All right, Gary, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. People want to follow your coverage of the Yankees and follow you on social media. How can they do that?
They should check me out on Twitter at Gary H. Phillips, and they can check out all my Yankee stories at the New York Daily News.
All right, Gary, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.